Hey friends, welcome to Morgan's Nature Notebook. Today, I'm hanging out with one of my favorite plants. This right here goes by a lot of different names. Its scientific name is Frasera speciosa. Other people call it green gentian, monument plant, miner's candle, or elkweed. You might wonder what's so cool about it. This thing might be 3, 5, some people have even seen them 9 feet tall.
Wow.
The other thing that's cool about it, speciosa actually means showy. And when you see this thing at its full height, it's covered with hundreds of flowers. You'll understand why they call it showy. It's really good for pollinators. Bumblebees are probably the biggest pollinator on this species, but it gets up to 100 different bugs on it. And just looking in here, I actually see a spider, a crab spider with a beetle. So it's important habitat for some of those little guys. People get confused on this plant. Even people who know about plants kind of get confused sometimes. And part of that confusion comes around basal leaves. And I say basal leaves and you're like, basil leaves? Not this kind of basil. B-A-S-A-L, like base. Base at the bottom. Those are the leaves that grow at the bottom of the stem. And when you see basil leaves, some people think, oh, that's a noxious weed like common mullein. I'm going to spray it or I'm going to pull it. Turns out, this is not like those plants. And we'll take a close-up look at some of the different basil leaves to try to figure out what they look like. So some cool facts about this. For a lot of years, people thought that this plant was a biennial. Now, biennial basically just means a plant that comes up as a basal rosette. So again, those leaves at the base, and a rosette is basically an arrangement of leaves in a circle, so almost looks like a rose petal maybe, or a rose flower. And in the second year, after it stores up all its nutrients in the first year, it puts up a flowering stalk. And there's a lot of plants that are biennials. And around here, some like common mullein or musk thistle are noxious weeds. So sometimes people see the basal leaves at the base on something like green gentian, and they spray it with chemical or they pull it. And turns out, this is not a biennial at all. In fact, it's something called a monocarp. Monocarps are plants that flower once and die. And what we know from research by Dr. David Inouye in Colorado is that most of these green gentians are flowering after about 30 years of collecting resources in their roots, underground. So the green gentians that we see flowering could be 20 years old, 30 years old, maybe even up to 80 or 100 years old. We don't know.
Wow.
One thing that's kind of cool that the jury's still out on, there's some research that suggested that the number of leaves on a basal rosette is an indication of how old that plant is. So I can count this one.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
16 leaves. So this plant might be 16 years old. Other research has shown that might not be the case, but it's a pretty good indicator. The older the plant is, typically the more leaves in the basal rosette. And something that's super cool about green gentian, I can look around here, you'll just have to take my word for it. There are hundreds of these tall things on the landscape, and they stuck up a little bit from the snow, and all the flowers, every single one of them, every single one is eaten. And because I know this place, I know what elk and deer ate every single one of them. So they needed that nutrition in the wintertime, and hopefully it helped more deer and elk survive. Okay, so here's one of the plants that's commonly confused with green gentian. This is called common mullein. And this is a stalk that came up last year, and these were all the flowers. So this was all yellow when it was in bloom. But this is what it looks like after a winter. Even though it was poking up above the snow, you can tell none of these have been munched on. So right here, we have a basil, not this basil like the base, Rosette of common mullein. It's really soft, and the underside is not smooth. Green gentian is really smooth, and this has all sorts of veins and texture on the bottom. But it's fuzzy, like a rabbit.
Nice and smooth, fuzzy, like a rabbit. Nice and smooth, fuzzy, like a rabbit.
Well, thanks for joining me, friends, on another edition of Morgan's Nature Notebook. We had a great day out in the field learning about green gentian, some new words like basil, rosette, biennial, and monocarp. Hopefully now you've got all the skills you need to help your friends and family tell the difference between green gentian and common mullein. So when you're out pulling weeds, you don't accidentally pull a plant that's as old as your grandparents. See you next time.